Good afternoon. This is HorseRacingNation.com handicapper Jarrod Horak, and we're talking 2015 Kentucky Derby contenders in this video. Last week we talked about the 5 horses that have been on my Kentucky Derby list since last September. Those 5 horses: Carpe Diem, International Star, American Pharoah, Frosted, and El Kabir. So now we're going to talk about the remaining horses on my list. I do my exceptional 11 Kentucky Derby contenders. We started that list last September. And these are the next 6 horses that are on the list. We'll start with Dortmund. He's 6 for 6 lifetime. His sire, Big Brown, won the Kentucky Derby. He's American Pharoah's stablemate, and they're the 2 favorites. Looks like American Pharoah may be the favorite in the Kentucky Derby, but Dortmund's going to be a solid second choice. He's obviously he hasn't been beaten, but he has been tested. As opposed to American Pharoah, he's had all his wins pretty easy. Dortmund has been in some battles with Firing Line. He was able to win both of those races, and then in his last 2 starts, he went wire to wire. We'll have to see what kind of strategy they're going to employ in the Kentucky Derby, because he's able to go to the front, he's able to sit off the pace as well. So he's dangerous, he's versatile, and he's got that. He's battle tested, and that's something that I said American Pharoah doesn't have that may give him the advantage. Also, he could end up getting in a pace battle. We'll have to see, because as I said, his last 2 races he went wire to wire, so maybe that's his preferred style, but he can pass horses as well. Obviously he's going to be a solid threat, and we'll have to see what kind of post position he draws. I think they'd probably be happier the further out for him, because he does like to get into those battles, and if I think he's down on the inside, and they might have to push him a little bit to maintain position. If they do that, I think he's going to end up possibly getting cooked in the Derby. So I think that they certainly want to be towards the outside with him. Now, if you like Dortmund, I think you have to consider Firing Line a contender. He's had 5 career starts with 2 wins in 3 seconds. He gave Dortmund everything he could handle in 2 starts, in the Los Alamitos Futurity and the Robert Lewis Stakes. He was right there with Dortmund. It looked like he had Dortmund beat in the Robert Lewis, but Dortmund came back on him. But then after that, he ran in the Sunland Derby, and he just ran away with that race. He was battling up on the pace. He won under a hand ride by 14 lengths, and he earned a good speed figure. Very similar to American Pharoah's race in the Arkansas Derby, where he just dominated, coasted home, earned a similar speed figure as well. And then his class is proven. He's already been in battles with Dortmund, and he's another one, though, that has that early pressing speed. And a question that I think we have with him is, he's been off for 6 weeks. Is he going to be too fresh and too keen to go early? Because we have a lot of horses that like to run close to the lead. You have Carpe Diem, American Pharoah, you have Dortmund and Firing Line, you have Materiality. So all these horses with a lot of quality, and they all like to be close to the lead. And Firing Line, coming off that layoff, a lot of times when you have those horses that are fresher, and then you have 20 horses breaking from the gate in the Derby, they're really keen to go. And we'll have to see. If his best chance for success, he needs to relax a little bit in the early going. Now, Upstart is the next contender, and he's very consistent, and he's earned some good quality speed figures that put him right in the mix when he runs his best race. He's had 7 career starts, 3 wins, 3 seconds, and a third. He was disqualified from the Fountain of Youth. He was clearly best that day, but they ended up taking him down. And then in the Florida Derby, he was a clear second to Materiality, and he had already qualified on points. That was a solid effort. Now, he did come back. He had a little bit of an illness. He missed a workout, but then he did work last week, and he worked fast. So he seems to, it looks like it was maybe just a 24-hour thing. He got over that quickly, and if he runs his best race, he could definitely be right there at the finish in the Derby. Materiality will be the next one, and this one, he's got a lot of upside, obviously. He's 3 for 3 lifetime, and he won that Florida Derby for Todd Pletcher. He got a 110 Beyer speed figure as well. That was an odd track, and Gulfstream, even in the Fountain of Youth, it was such a strange track. It was been playing much different than other years. Usually you get the fast times and the speed dominating at Gulfstream, but the track was heavy and tiring and for the Fountain of Youth and the Florida Derby. But Materiality did get the job done. You have to go all the way back to 1882 for the last unraced 2-year-old that won the Derby, and that was Apollo. He has a lot to overcome, and especially in a year like this, we have so many quality horses. I think he's really, he's in a tough spot here. You have a lot of horses that are battle-tested, and they have a lot of quality, and they're just almost as fast as him as well. And then his running style could work against him. So he's got a lot to overcome, but he does have a lot of raw ability. Now, Mubtaahij is the next one, and this one's the real mystery coming in from Dubai. 7 career starts, he's got 4 wins and a second. He dominated the UAE Derby, and trainer Mike DeCock, every time he brings horses to the US, he hasn't had many, I think 6 overall. They've all hit the board, so when he brings horses here, he means business. This horse seems to have a lot of quality, dominated that UAE Derby. He has 2 wins at a mile and 3/16. That's the distance of the Preakness. He's bred to run all day. We already know that he has a lot of stamina based on his last 2 races. questions to answer. Obviously, horses have come from the UAE Derby before and tried to run in the Kentucky Derby, and they haven't had success. And then this year, as we said, it's really stacked with talent. I think it's going to be tough for him to do, but obviously he has the ability to do it. It's just, is he going to be able to step up and run against this kind of competition with all that shipping? He's not going to run with Lasix, and they couldn't use his feed either. He's had to switch his feed. So there's a lot of things that he's going to have to overcome. And then the one last thing is, in the UAE Derby, he did sit a perfect trip. He sat right behind two speed horses. He tipped off the rail and he went right past them. He showed good acceleration, but he may not sit that. You can't expect to sit that kind of perfect trip in the Kentucky Derby. Now, the final horse on my list is War Story. Very consistent. He has 5 starts with 2 wins, 2 seconds, and a third. He was second in the Lecomte Stakes, second in the Risen Star, and third in the Louisiana Derby. And International Star won all 3 of those races. Very consistent. He'll plug away, but one of the negatives is in all 3 of those stakes races I just mentioned, he lost ground in the stretch, and they're all shorter than the mile and a quarter Kentucky Derby. So if he was losing ground in the stretch in those shorter races, I don't think that he's going to get any better at the 10 furlong distance. But his consistency at least gives him a shot maybe to finish in the Superfecta. If you go over to horseracing.nation.wordpress.com, you can see all of my Kentucky Derby contenders, the videos, also the written blogs as well. So go over to horseracing.nation.wordpress.com to see all that information. If you go over to horseracing.nation.com, you can see all of the top Kentucky Derby contenders, the latest news. So everything that you want right there for the Kentucky Derby is at horseracing.nation.com. That'll wrap up this video, and we'll come back and we'll talk about the remaining horses that are pointing to the Kentucky Derby.